This morning we begin a new quarter in our Sabbath school lesson. And today's particular lesson covers the first three chapters of the book of Genesis, and it's on the topic of education. I brought a visual aid with me this morning. Anybody know what kind of flower this is? A rose, yes. Can you imagine when you look at the beauty of a rose today, what it must have been like in the Garden of Eden? Now, there's one thing significantly different about this rose than the rose in the Garden of Eden. Have you ever a thought what that might be? What's the difference between this rose and the rose in the Garden of Eden? This one has thorns on it, okay. Thorns, anything else? It is real, but it's dead. Yeah. This one is fading away. I took it out of the place that you generally put things by the curb. This rose is definitely on its way out. It had its high day and its beauty and its scent, but isn't it true that even though it is dying and it's on its way out, it still has some beauty, that when you look at it, you can see both evidence of God's creation and you can see evidence of the impact of sin. And that's why nature by itself has a mixed message. Nature, you can see the glory of God. And in nature, you can see the scars and the results of sin. And so this is true to nature today, but it was not so in the first two chapters in the book of Genesis. So today we're going to talk about learning and teachers and environment. And let's begin. And I have some true and false questions as well as general questions. Speak up nice and loud because we are on Zoom or YouTube, and people have said, hey, we haven't heard the question. And by my answer, I have to reflect back what you have said. So the first question I have is thinking about learning. True or false, a young, intelligent teen is more hungry to learn than an adult who dropped out of school for 3 years and saw that they need to come back to school. So who do you think has the greatest hunger to learn? Some young person that's growing up through academy and into college, or a person who dropped out for 3 years and saw they needed to go back and have decided to go back? Who do you think is going to be more hungry to learn? The young student or the person that's going back after they've been out in the workplace for a little bit? How many think the young student has the advantage? All right, how many think the person going back has the advantage? What gives the advantage to the young student? He does have some advantages, but are they greater? What do you think, Maria? Okay, the young person has a goal in mind, and that motivates them to go along. Okay, what about the student that goes back to school? What about the student who goes back? Why would you think they'd have an advantage?
He realizes how much he hasn't learned.
He realizes what he hasn't learned, and how much it's important for him to learn. Yeah. Usually, when you talk about the motive of learning, probably the person going back has a greater motive. Does that greater motive guarantee that they're going to get the best grades? They may struggle because they've been out for a while, but are they motivated? Yeah, they've gone back intentionally, where the young person says, oh, I can't wait till I get out of this schooling a bit. Okay. So that leads really to the next question. True or false, motive has as much influence on your success as a student as does intelligence. Motive is important, intelligence is as well, But a motivated person will tend to have a drive to do better. Now, that leads to the question about our lesson. Question, what was the motive of Adam and Eve to learn in their environment of the Garden of Eden? What motivated them to learn in the Garden of Eden? What do you think their motive was? What motivated them to learn? Because God had a whip?
I think one motivator would have been curiosity.
Curiosity, a motivator.
Everything was new. Everything was new. They were seeing everything for the first time. And, I mean, we can't really comprehend what the Garden of Eden was like. We can get an idea in our minds, but what it really was is probably more fantastic and beautiful and amazing than we can even imagine. And we've seen things in this world again and again. You've seen a beautiful sunset, you've seen a river, you've seen the mountains. Everything they saw was brand new.
Yes, yes.
Everything.
And so Jason says, curiosity. Can you imagine if we went to Cape Spear and the whales were, and we could go down and get in the water and go to be with them and not have to worry about the undertows and the tides and the currents, and we'd be able to go out without fear of death? Curiosity was one of the great motivators, yes. Any other thing do you think motivated them to want to learn besides curiosity?
They had an instructor that would tell them about it, and it illuminated what is in front of them.
Okay, how many of you would say that they had an instructor that really probably motivated? Have you ever had a teacher that really motivated you on the subject? You say, wow, do they know their stuff? I really would like to learn. And so Adam and Eve had an instructor that really opened up avenues of learning. Check this out, look at this, be adventurous in finding this out. Yeah, and you add to that, all is new to them. That definitely would help motivate them to learn. Okay. Was there anything about Adam and Eve's environment that hindered them from learning? Was there anything about it? Yeah, go ahead.
Just back up to your previous question about motivation.
Yes.
If it was just the two of them in the garden, then that could mean a lot more one-on-one attention rather than stood in front of a class of 40 or 80.
Yes, yes. Okay, the fact just two of them, dialogue. I have a question about that in just a little bit. Okay, was there anything about their environment that you think hindered them from learning? Was there anything you can think of that might have hindered them from learning? There was one thing in the garden that they weren't supposed to learn from. Yeah, only one, right? The tree of knowledge of good and evil. So there was something that hindered them from learning, and as we'll find out a little later, they didn't think it was, really a hindrance. They could learn that too. That's what they did later, as we'll find out. Was there anything God did? Okay, next question. Do you think it is of benefit for us to have an in-depth, accurate knowledge, truthful knowledge of what is happening around us, including the things that are evil? What benefit do you feel comes to us by having an accurate knowledge of what's taking place around us, including what is evil? Is there a benefit to us in having that knowledge? And if so, what is that benefit? Would you say there's a benefit of us having an accurate knowledge of what's happening around us, including the things that are evil? Larry?
I don't know. I've said lots of times I wish I never knew anything about it. I've said that to the Lord a lot of times. I said I wish I never knew it. But I do know it more than I do the good.
Okay, Larry says There are times, there's some knowledge I wish I didn't know. Have you ever been flipping the channels on your TV and a music hits you that you know it relates to something that is really evil, horror type? And what do you generally do? Oh, I wonder what that's about. I find that my reaction is quick, get off that channel. I do not want to have that visual listening experience in what is definitely on the evil side. I don't want that. Why don't I want it? Because what's going to happen to that night when I try to get to sleep, or the next morning, whatever you put into your mind is there to come back to you. Isn't that true? It's there to come back to you. So there are some things I would prefer not to know.
I think having a knowledge of evil is necessary. I don't think we need to have an in-depth knowledge of every type of evil, but God gives us wisdom and discernment, and we need to recognize the good from the bad. And especially in this day and age, we need to recognize things that on the outside may seem fine, but when you look a little deeper, you see that this thing is rotten in the core, and I don't want to have anything to do with it, because the devil never comes at you with a full-blown lie.
Mm-hmm.
He never does. He mixes in the truth. So we need to be able to discern what is really truth and what's truth mixed with a bit of evil.
So are you saying that to be able to identify evil, I need to know a little bit about evil? It helps?
It does. It helps more to know the good. If you know what good looks like, then you can say, this doesn't look like good, so I know it's evil.
Okay. That leads into my next question. Go ahead, Thomas.
Adam and Eve already know good and bad, because the fallen angel, for example, they fallen, so Adam and Eve must have known what was right or wrong in this particular situation.
Okay. Listen to this question. Where is it here? What was the drawback for Adam and Eve as they were told if they ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they would die? So what was the drawback to them when they heard that? You're going to die if you eat of this fruit. There was a drawback in hearing that question as far as they were concerned. Why was it not really grasped and understood by them? Because they've never experienced it. Right. They never experienced evil, so it said they're going to die. And so what was the question they could ask themselves? What does dying mean? I've never seen anything die. Isn't it true if someone said to you they're going to die, you would have visual experiences of what dying is all about? And therefore you could say, oh yeah, I don't want that. I've seen a loved one in the casket, or I've seen a dog hit by a car. I've seen my child, drown. We have experiences. And when Adam and Eve were told, if you eat, you're going to die, they'd say, okay, what does that mean? I've never seen it before. How did they know then that death was not a good thing? How did they know that death was not a good thing? Because God had said, you don't want that. If you eat it, you're going to die. It's something he didn't condone or encourage. So if God didn't do it, and he's the source of good, and I can see all the beauty around me, then it must not be a good thing. All right, we're going into Sunday's lesson, the first school. What was the first textbook for Adam and Eve? What was the first textbook that they had? God was the first textbook. I'll unpack that just a little bit, Thomas. Most people would say nature. Why would you say that God was a textbook? Wasn't he the teacher only?
He was the only person, he was the only available teacher around, yes.
I think you have an insight. Have you ever studied your teacher? Have you ever analyzed their methods and the type of person they were? So it's not only the content of what they teach, but it is themselves as they teach. Isn't that true? Have you found that in teachers that you've had along the way? They had nature to study, and they had the teacher to study.
There's a big difference between what we call a teacher today and what God actually was to Adam and Eve. And the big difference is most teachers today don't create the curriculum. They don't write the textbook. Right? They know the material. Yes, teachers know their material because they've taught it again and again, and they study it, and they know it inside and out. But they haven't created the material.
Yes.
Whereas God, as the first teacher, everything he was teaching Adam and Eve about came from his hand.
Yes. Do you think he had to use notes?
He didn't have to use notes.
I think I skipped a question that I wanted to ask. Yeah. It is true that Adam and Eve came from the hand of their Creator, but there was one thing they lacked. What was it they lacked when they came from the Creator's hand? One thing they lacked. And you think about it, God created Adam and Eve and they lacked something? They lacked something, yes. What was it you can think that they lacked?
Knowledge of good and evil.
They did know the knowledge of good and evil, yes, that is true. I was thinking of something else, but that's true. What else do you think they might have lacked? Experience. Right. You must have been reading my mind. They had mental ability. They came fresh from the Creator's hand, but they had not lived making decisions yet. They came off starting to make, came off and took in all of creation and the beauty of that, and they just praised God, but they did not have experience. They had to learn. And that became one of the big issues at the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They had no experience of what evil was like, and so they didn't have the fear that comes by making a decision that's wrong and tasting consequences. They had not experienced tasting negative consequences. So they were innocent. They had the opportunity then to grow and develop and make decisions. And yeah, that may help answer one other question that's going to come up is, why did God permit the tree of knowledge of good and evil? But just tuck that one away. Next question. We're going into Sunday's lesson, the first school. So what did Adam and Eve need in order to be able to study nature around them? What do you think that Adam and Eve needed in order to be able to study nature around them? What did they really need? You mentioned earlier, Jason. So when they were placed in the Garden of Eden, they looked around, they saw the birds, the animals, the sky, the fish, the oceans. What do they need within themselves to be able to learn?
Companionship.
How would companionship encourage them and help them to learn?
Well, every individual is made with some intelligence that bounces off of another being that has intelligence, and you need that interaction to grow.
Yes, so the answer was one thing that helped them and they needed to grow was there was two of them. And often when you have two looking at the same thing, they ask each other questions, and with those questions they delve into what can we learn from that. So yes, and they need the companionship help them, but inquiring minds, curiosity, willing to investigate, patience, all those things contribute. Have you ever come across someone who did not want to learn?
Yes, I've taught them several years.
Thomas says yes, he's taught students for several years. And so there's just some students that don't want to learn. I'm here for another reason. My parents made me come, or I got to get a grade to get out of here. Yeah. So there are some people that don't want to learn. I really pity them.
I think though that's when you're a young pastor, you don't have much sense, you think you know it all, and you don't really know anything until you start getting a little older in life. Because right now, as far as I'm concerned, this is a great era to live in, because the knowledge, I can't get enough knowledge. Because I go on YouTube, anything I don't know and I want the answer, I go on YouTube and I'll find an answer, especially when you do construction work or anything to do with cars or anything. So, as you get older, I think you acquire that thirst for more knowledge. But when you're young, no, because when I went to school, I had no interest. School to me was more than life for anything.
Yeah. So the thought is, we've never lived in a better time when we have available to us the ability to get answers to our questions than now. And that is really outstanding. It's amazing. I wonder how to change this particular part in this particular gadget, and you just Google it, and it'll tell you how. It just is amazing. It is. Yeah.
It's not just the young who are sometimes resistant to learning.
Oh.
If you talk to an older, more mature person and you try to show them a different, better way to do something that they've been doing all their lives, you will come across resistance to learning. You definitely will.
I think that's gone over the air. Everybody's heard that.
Right. But the thing about the willingness, a student's willingness to learn makes a big difference. You can have a class of 40 students, and you can teach them all exactly the same, and you can treat them all exactly the same, present the lesson exactly the same. If there are 5 students in that class who don't want to learn, they will not learn. It just won't happen. But it shows another aspect of who God really is and his character when you know that God will not force us to obey him, and he won't force us to learn. He'll present it. He'll put it all out there, but the choice is ours. So it shows that the fact, he wants us all to learn, and he wants us all to follow him, but there's nothing that he will do that will force us to do that. What he just wants, he can't. It's not in his character to do that.
Yes. Good. I think they heard that. You're close enough. All right. So this is the thought question. What was their study the first day that they were alive? What did they study the first day that Adam and Eve were alive? Can you think of what their first study was on that day?
Well, Adam had a job of naming all the animals, so.
First full day. Yes, that was the day he was alive. But what was the experience of the first full day that they were alive?
You're talking about the 2 of them.
Yep. You were going to say?
The Sabbath.
It was the Sabbath. Yes, it was the Sabbath, the first full day. And so what do you think their study was that day? You think there's a good chance that God was part of that day? Now, we know that God came and visited them, right? He came down in the cool of the day. So it's a good probability heavenly beings came and enjoyed that day. They just didn't sit there and say, what do I do today? It's kind of boring. What should I? That they came and it says God rested in that day from his activity. And it's a good probability they engaged and they enjoyed the beauty of creation. And you know what happens when you're in a park and it's beautiful around you? You have the ducks in the pond, you have the paths to walk on, you have the flowers. Don't you like just walking around and looking at the park? You say, wow, look at this. This is beautiful, beautiful. I just enjoy this so much. And you're chattering and it becomes a very, very positive day. So I think we answered the next one. What did God have to teach Adam and Eve since they were created and pronounced very good? What were they lacking? And we said they were lacking experience. And although things were created very beautifully around them, they did not yet explore this beauty, and so they had all that to engage their mind. Can you imagine? Wherever you went, you could interact with it and look at it, like this flower. You could take a look at it, and you could smell it, and you could have eyes to see what's taking place there. So that discovery of almost like a child in a candy store, right? Or Orlando going down Manual River, running out on the rocks and discovering every pool of water and throwing a stick out in the current and watch it go. It was just a discovery, and it was a delightful and enjoyable discovery. What can we learn about God from nature? So that it was true then, and there is truth there today. So what would you say we can learn about God? What are some of the things we can learn about God from nature? From nature that's around us. What can we learn about God? Heavens declare the glory of God. So what is there in nature that we can learn about God? Anything? Yeah, so do I hear you say, when you look at the human being, God made it complete? Have you bumped into anything in nature that's incomplete? Even the cycles of the rain. Cycles of the rain, it goes to the river, it evaporates, goes back in the sky, back. It's just a cycle. It's an interdependence in nature that we have. The fruit trees bear the fruit, we eat the fruit, it goes through its season, comes back again as fruit.
You know, if a goat has a kid, the kid will go to its mother. He will not go to the goat itself, right? The ram. He will not go to the ram to look for something to eat. They go to the mother. In the same way with anything on the face of the earth. You know, you can see how it all works the way God intended it to work.
Yes.
Like when a baby is hungry, it goes to its mother. But they, you know, when they got formulas and everything to mix it so you can have a baby and
Yes.
not even be a mother. But at the beginning, that was not so. You had to have a mother to be
Yeah, it's very interesting. Nature, when there's a birth, the new birth goes to its mother. Yeah, yeah.
It's, you know, you see all the animals, it's the same way, right? I mean, it's amazing when you watch them and you see them when they get hungry, they go to their mom looking for the milk, right?
Yes, yes. Do you think in creation, the time that they... By the way, how long do you think Adam and Eve might have been in the Garden of Eden before they rebelled? Any ideas in the first 5 books, chapters? There's one clue that gives you an insight how long it might have been, and that's in the birth of Seth. In the birth of Seth, it says Adam was 130 years old. Oh, if Adam was 130 years old at the birth of Seth, and he had Cain and Abel, so you go back 30 years anyway, maybe, because they were definitely teenagers. So they may have been in the garden up to 100 years. We don't know, but the fact it says third child was 130, Adam was 130 at the third child, then you go back at least about 100 years, and they may have been in the garden because the Bible has basically 3 chapters that tell the total story, right? 3 chapters that tell the total story.
You think it took
I missed that, Thomas. Try again.
Do you think it took all that time for Eve to become curious about the tree?
How long would it have taken Eve to become curious about the tree?
Yeah.
The Bible doesn't tell us.
No.
So it's an unknown.
It's unknown.
Are you saying how long does it take a lady to become curious about something? It may have happened the first week.
If they were driven out of the Garden of Eden,
Yes,
and it wasn't until after they were driven out that she had Cain, really.
correct.
You know, because they couldn't partake of knowledge, knowledge of good and evil, they partook of. But the tree of life, they couldn't partake of that. And if they did, everyone would be still alive today.
Correct.
So
So Adam and Eve, they continued to eat the tree of life. They would have been alive, so they were prevented by the angel from getting there.
sin was, they were after sinning, after that, then they had Cain.
Correct. So if Seth is 130 and Cain and Abel's before that, then your imagination is open. It doesn't say any place how long, but that means it could have been upwards to 100 years before they went out the garden and Cain and Abel. It's possible, but I don't get the picture. Well, we just don't know, and you can only speculate how long. But the picture, of course, the Bible covers a lot. In 3 chapters, you go from creation to the fall, and just how long that was, we don't know. But one of the elements that Thomas says that could have meant that it was in the fairly early stages was curiosity. Curiosity may have influenced how long, and it may have been earlier rather than later. That leads into, was there anything that was not good in the Garden of Eden? What was not good? The serpent was not good. Let me ask you, was the tree that God created not good? Well, what did Eve say? She said the fruit of the tree looked very good and something to be desired. So the tree was not, it was just like the pig. Who created the pig? But God says it's not good for you, don't eat it. So God created the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He just says, it's your test, don't eat it. The devil is around there, so leave it alone. So it leads to a very significant question. Why did God allow the tree of knowledge of good and evil to be in the garden in the first place, when he knew that it would be the area of temptation? So if God knew, would you do that for your child? If you knew there was an area of temptation for your children, would you say, now you can go any place in the house, but in that room, I want you to know there's something, you can't go in there because you'll be tempted to do evil. Would you do that to your child? I don't think so. So if God loved us and created us, why did God permit the tree of knowledge of good and evil to be in the garden? Why would he allow that?
He created the human being and he knew the consequences. So what? He created the human beings. We're going back.
Oh, okay, you could approach it another way. Thomas says he created the human beings. He knew the decision that he ultimately would make. So why did he create the human beings? Yeah, that's a parallel question.
But you're trying to analyze the mind of God, which is still a sin beyond us.
So are analyzing the mind, but I think there's a practical answer to that. I think there's an evident answer to why God permitted the tree of knowledge of good and evil to be there.
Well, he knows the end from the beginning, so he knew you as he did with Jeremiah before you were born forth. So God knows everything, and he can see the long-term plan of how it's going to work out. And we know what Jesus had to go through for it. You know, so how do we question something that God knows?
Well, step back just for a minute, because other parts of the Bible let us know that there is what happening in the universe. There is a great controversy. And would the fact that there's a great controversy in the universe impact the knowledge of tree and good and evil in any way? Can you see any relationship between the great controversy between good and evil, a rebellious angel in the universe, and his followers who were kicked out? Can you see any connection between that great controversy and the tree of knowledge of good and evil?
It's a great contrast between the two.
It's a big, great contrast, yeah, but how does that lead to have the tree?
Who is going to be your authority?
And so it was,
Person in the tree or the person that created you?
yeah, and we've already talked about one of the things of God, about God and us, is he's given us freedom of choice. And that's the basis of love response. It's freedom to choose. So God wants to give us freedom to choose. And if in the universe is a great controversy, do you think there would have been a controversy over you are preventing us from giving your new creation a free choice on who they will decide? The rest of the universe is having the choice. The angels had a choice, and you are preventing. So how do we know that the new creation really loves you? Didn't that come out in the story of Job? Job, yeah, Job is serving you because of what you're giving to him. So in that dynamic, I think we have an insight into why God permitted the tree of knowledge, good and evil. But in permitting that, there is something he did that contributed so they should not want even to have that fruit of the tree of knowledge. What did he do that should have been enough so that Adam and Eve did not want to eat of the tree of knowledge, good and evil? Can you think of what God did? Yeah, that was a little motivation, but not a whole lot. But let me ask you, did God keep them in a starvation mode? Did God keep them without something in their refrigerator? What type of environment were they in?
They could eat everything except from that tree.
Yeah. God says, I have provided for you abundance. I've given to you everything you want. So there's a good probability they weren't hungry. And does that help? Does that help if you're not hungry and you go to the refrigerator and you open up and you see a nice half a chocolate cake there and you're not hungry? Does that help you to resist taking a piece of cake? Yeah, it does. Does being hungry add to your temptation? Yeah, it does. So the fact God said, I've given you all the trees and the fruit for you to enjoy. All of them. There's only one that you're supposed to leave alone. That should have encouraged them. And yet it became a choice. A choice.
I have a question, Pastor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Was the only purpose of that tree to see whether or not Adam and Eve would succumb to temptation, or was there another purpose for that tree?
Okay, the question is, was the purpose of the tree of knowledge and evil just to be a test for Adam and Eve?
Yeah.
Good question. What do you think? Was there any other benefit to the tree other than to be a test?
I mean, God didn't need the tree.
God didn't need the tree. Yes, nice and loud.
Yeah, I think that it goes back to the cosmic context, right? So if the tree had not been there, then Adam and Eve were going to serve God, not willingly, but they were going to obey, and that is like automatic, like robots. But because the tree of knowledge of evil, good and evil was there, they had an opportunity to choose whether to listen to God or to
So, yes. Did you have your hand up? Okay, expand that a little more on what is the benefit of their making choices. Is there a benefit to them in making a choice? What does it do to them?
Well, so Satan accused Jesus, God, that he doesn't give people the opportunity to choose. That is the center of the cosmic conflict, right? And so God also wants to prove to Satan that he doesn't dictate for people.
Yeah, if you make a choice, is it easier to make the same choice the second time? If you resist something once, is it easier to resist it the second time? So, brothers bringing out the importance of making choices. But maybe you have another insight, Jason.
Well, I think I agree, because if the tree was really the only rule that God laid down in the garden, there was, everything else was, yeah, it's all good. Right? If there hadn't been, like the brother said, if there hadn't been anything there that Adam and Eve had to make their own choice about, they wouldn't have been able to exercise their power of choice.
Yes.
Because if you look at what God said to them, he said, everything in the garden, everything, all this stuff is yours. Do what you want with it. This one thing, no.
Yeah. Have you ever seen on, I'm not sure what it is, but it's on YouTube, where they have a child sit down and they put 3 candies in front of them? And they say, I'm going to leave, but don't eat those 3 candies. And when I come back, if you haven't eaten those 3 candies, I'm going to give you a whole bag of candies. And then the guy leaves, or the lady leaves, and you watch the children look at the 3 candies and wonder if they will take them or not. And every once in a while, there'll be one that'll take it, but there are several of them that resist, and they choose not to. So, and they have followed those children, and they say those children that have been willing to self-control have a better chance of success than those that yield. Yeah.
And I've seen a similar condition where a child has got a lot of toys, for a couple of times, and another little child's over here with one toy, and they will go over there and take that toy because they want what he's got,
Yeah, yeah,
It's funny how it's built into us all.
yes.
But I think of Job too. Job was given the choice to make a good choice, which he was doing. But Satan was there and saying to the Lord, if you touch him on his hand, he will certainly curse you.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So he was given the choice. So I'm wondering if Satan said to God, give Adam and Eve a choice. Put it there and let's see what they will do.
Yes.
The nature of us, unfortunately, passed upon us, is to do evil.
Yeah. Samir, I'm going to throw you a question. If, I'm going to ask you a question. Yeah. All right. If you were God and you were standing there by the tree of knowledge, good and evil, and your little girl started to reach out for that fruit, what would you do? What would you do?
I have no answer. The thing is, God is the only one that knows what has to come or what comes. He's the only one. So the fact that whoever is around, like say Satan or the angels, they don't know what's coming, right? So he has no choice than to give Adam and Eve the power of choice. He had to demonstrate it, like he had no choice. Otherwise, it would have been a god of no choice. So he just put just Adam and Eve in a garden with like perfectly, and not giving them the choice to be fair.
So God knew the consequences of Eve doing that. But Eve did not know, many angels did not know, and so he permitted it. But the fact that he knew and restrained himself, most of us would have reached out to our child and grabbed them by the hand and said, no, don't do that, right? But God permitted it, not for his own benefit, but so that God permitted the opportunity of a demonstration of freedom of choice.
And we shouldn't forget that he had a plan, also God. He had a plan ahead, like he knew already.
Yes. Was it a painful plan? It was a painful plan. Yeah, it was a painful. But what God must have gone through in that moment when he saw Eve doing that, only heaven will be able to tell us. He knew. Yes, the decision was made early that if Adam and Eve made that decision, what they would do. That probably made it more difficult, because to restrain, you knew what you were getting into then, right? Okay, we're going to missing the message. The devil told Eve she would become like God if she took of the fruit. What was wrong with that statement? The devil said that she would become like God if she partook of the fruit. Is there anything wrong with that statement? Is that a true statement? Is it also an accurate statement? What was she already like? She was already a reflection of God, wasn't she? Because she said, you would become like God in this knowledge. But she already was like God in many things, because Adam and Eve were created in the reflection of God. And of course, he was laying a trap for... How could God allow the devil to be so aggressive with his message to Eve when he declared lies? And he was silent. He could have spoken out. Didn't he have the opportunity, the ability to speak out when Eve was there? Eve, give me your attention, get away from there. But the devil was so aggressive in his tempting of Eve. It tells you so much about God's wanting us to have free choice to love him and giving us the opportunity to make that. Why is confidence and boldness so effective in deception? Why is the expression of confidence and boldness so persuasive? What makes it so persuasive? If you're bold and confident, what you say, even though it's a lie. It gives you what kind of impression about that person? Well, they must know what they're talking about, and they seem convinced, and it seems good to them. And since I don't really know, it adds pressure to the temptation that comes your way.
That's where we have all these evangelists today. They're bold, oh man, they're bold and they're confident.
Yeah. So that's part of deception, right? The boldness. And just remember, they often say, if you're not sure of your argument, hit the pulpit a second time and kick the cat, and you give the impression you really know what you're talking about, because people will believe you. Oh, our time is gone. Jesus made the big step to regain what was lost. I've listed 8 things that were lost. But let me ask you this question. If we are led by the Holy Spirit, is it God's plan to get us back to be as much and as close as possible to what his creation was at the beginning? Is it God's intention to get us back this side of heaven before Jesus comes? Is God trying to move us back to be as much as we can, like Adam and Eve now, in the condition that we're in? You think that's true? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, despise, oh, better to stop. Let me go down. We know from our text on Thursday where it talks about God will allow us to go so far, and then he has a line in the road. And if in rebellion we keep down that track, there'll be a spot when we cross that line, like he did with, and Jesus, Peter talks about it. He says, here are 3 examples of what it'll be like to those that go down in dissension and rebellion. Take a look at what happened in the time of Noah. Take a look at what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. And take a look at the angels that went down that track. There will be a time that God will. Now, let me ask you one final question. If God loves everybody, and he does, why doesn't he save the people in rebellion and just put them on a separate planet and see that they have the food and water? Why doesn't he just put them on a separate planet and let them live? Why will he destroy them? I mean, he could give a separate planet, give them all the booze they wanted, all the nightlight they wanted, and just let them live, and once in a while send a rocket ship with the food they need. Why wouldn't God do that? Yes?
I think because we still have a role in witnessing to those people.
He still has a role.
We have to witness to those people. Like, he still gives them a chance. Whether if we would put them in separate planet, chances are less that they would give up on their way.
Yes. I got the signal. Shh. Loving Father, how good it is to share together the great story of Genesis and think of what you did there in your character revealed. May we be more like you, and most may we respond to all the benefits you've given to us by loving you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Jesus would have died for just one person of the 1.3 billion who live in India, Bhutan, Nepal, and the Maldives. That's how much he loves the people here in the Southern Asia division of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The work of the Adventist Church began in Southern Asia, in India, in 1893. 5 colporteurs, 2 from America and a family of 3 from New Zealand, arrived to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. The next year brought another missionary, Georgia Burris. The mission board of the Seventh-day Adventist Church paid Georgia's passage from the United States to India. Once there, she was responsible for her own living expenses, but God provided in miraculous ways. Later, she married a fellow missionary, and together they ministered in India for 40 years. From these humble beginnings, the Adventist Church in Southern Asia has grown to 1.6 million members. We praise God for this growth. But the vast majority of people in this region have not yet heard the good news about Jesus. Less than 1% of the population are Adventist. The Maldives, a country of 392,000 people, has no Adventist work. More than 800 languages are spoken in Nepal, Bhutan, and India. We have materials in only a handful of those languages. And yet church members, such as Global Mission Pioneers, are sharing the love of Jesus in communities throughout this vast territory. Urban centers of influence have been established in cities, and thousands are being helped through schools and medical institutions. Shir Memorial Hospital has been treating the sick in Nepal since 1960, and there are 11 more Adventist hospitals that offer holistic medical care in India. Thousands receive a holistic education at 144 Adventist secondary schools and 9 institutions of higher education across India, including Spicer Adventist University. Hope Channel India broadcasts in 9 languages, sharing stories of encouragement and inspiration to people such as Rajesh. Overwhelmed with financial difficulties in his family, Rajesh just couldn't concentrate at work. He lost his job and became depressed. One day he came across Hope Channel India's prayer line and asked for prayer. This was the first step in getting to know Jesus and finding hope for his family. He now has a new job to provide for his family. Please continue to pray for the people of India, Bhutan, Nepal, and the Maldives. And pray for the church. With limited resources and in the face of many challenges, it seeks to remain faithful to God's call. Thank you for your mission offerings, which fuel mission in the Southern Asia Division and around the world.